Good morning, and you're all very welcome to another Signpost Series webinar. Hope you're all keeping well and looking forward to another very interesting presentation today. I suppose the good weather is still lasting, and it's great to see. I see the sun shining outside the window. Unfortunately, I suppose a bit of rain is coming, but talking to a couple of farmers around the country, a little bit of rain wouldn't go astray now to kick off crops. So, with that, we're back to water quality this week. And with improvements in water quality across the country high on the agenda at the moment, we know agriculture can play a key role in reducing losses. And today, to update us on the Teagasc Better Farming for Water campaign that was launched last year, we're joined by Teagasc Director of Research, Professor Pat Dillon. Good morning, Pat.
Good morning, Cathal.
How are you keeping? All well?
Good, Cathal. I'm delighted to be here.
Great, and great to have you, Pat. We're also joined by Teagasc Catchment Coordinator in Dubai, Fiona Doolan, who's going to help me out with questions. Good morning, Fiona.
Morning, Cathal.
How are you today?
All good today, Cathal. Looking for some very good questions to come, I'm sure, later on. Being the topic that it is, it's so important to so many people. It'll be a great opportunity to have some questions in.
Lovely stuff. And Pat, it's great to have you on the show today. And Teagasc have been doing a lot of work in recent years, and now we have the campaign now as well. Maybe can just for our viewers, Pat, just that maybe haven't seen you before, or can you maybe tell us a little bit about your role in Teagasc?
Okay, Cathal, I'm currently Director of Research at Teagasc. Prior to that, I was head of the Animal and Grassland Programme. So what's my connections with this? This is one of our real key initiatives within Teagasc. We launched the Better Farm for Water campaign the end of May last year, 30th of May actually last year. So I'm really involved with the team in terms of getting this up and running. A lot of planning has gone in, and I suppose, Carl, you know about it, and Fiona knows about it. It's really now we're getting the program in place, and getting the actions around. So it's really important for us, this program, Carl.
Yeah, very important. If you want to say that top priority for Teagasc.
Yes, Carl. Yeah, no doubt about that, Carl. No doubt about that. So, and we should have good discussion on that today, yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah, and just remind everyone we're going to be recording today's session, and please do submit your questions to Q&A tab, as Fiona said. So, Pat, if you want, you can get your slides ready there and start to share. And just as Pat is getting his slides ready there, just to remind everyone that there is a podcast version available of the Signpost Series webinar, available to listen when you're on the move, or if you're in the tractor or in the milking parlour, just to keep yourselves up to date on what's going on all our environmental issues. That's great, Pat. Your presentation is so myself and Fiona will switch off and we'll chat to you after. Thanks, Pat.
Okay, and thanks very much, Cathal, and thanks, Fiona, and thanks, Yvonne, for organising the seminar. So the subject matter, as I was asked to deal with this morning, was putting the Better Farming for Water campaign into action, as I've discussed with Cathal. So just the outline of my presentation, then I just want to talk briefly about the Better Farm for Water campaign, bring everyone up to speed what the campaign is about. Then I want to go on and look at the current 8 river catchments that we have prioritised as part of the Better Farm for Water campaign. And just to be clear, that the Bandon, the Barrow, the Boyne, the Blackwater, the Lee, the Nore, the Slaney and the Shore. And I'll go into details further on as to why we selected those. Then we have 8 actions that identified as part of the Better Farm for Water campaign, and I want to talk about those 8 actions in relation to how we're going to deliver the program. And then I just want to finish a small bit on campaign management and delivery of the program at the end. So just a background slide, why do we have this Better Farming for Water campaign? As most people know, at this stage, the Water Framework Director has set a target that all water bodies are in either good or high ecological status by 2027. So that's the background to it. We have, again, based on the EPA data, the main pressures for water quality in Ireland, the 4 main ones are agriculture, hydromorphology, urban wastewater, and forestry. And then if you look at the EPA have identified over 1,600 water bodies, and water bodies can be a section of any one of the catchments. 1,600 water bodies at risk, and these are that they have to improve either to good or high water quality status. And over 1,000 of those are associated that agriculture is the significant pressure. Even saying that though, over 2/3 of those, there are other significant pressures on those water bodies other than agriculture, but agriculture has been the prime one. And if you look at it, in 62% of the water bodies that are at risk are associated with agriculture. And then just the baseline that 54% of Irish water bodies are either good or high ecological status currently. So that's where we are in terms of our programme. So, first section I talked in is just a brief outline of the Better Farm for Water campaign. And this originated with the Minister sending a letter to the Director of Teagasc to ask Teagasc to lead, and its bottom is lead a campaign to improve water quality. Last May, on the 30th of May, we launched this programme. And really the aim is to support and accelerate the adoption of actions on all farms, and then really important, as I emphasise the presentation, is all farms to improve all water bodies where agriculture is a significant pressure to good or high ecological status. And that goes back to what the framework directive is about. So we identified 8 actions for change in that campaign, on the campaign. I'm not going to go into detail here because I will be going into detail later on, but there was 3 components to that. There was nutrient management, farmyard management, and land management. There was 3 actions around nutrient management, 2 on farm management, and 3 in land management. And as I said, I'll go into those in more detail later on. The delivery then of that, we identified 6 pillars that were really important in the delivery of the programme. And again, it's a multi-actor approach, as the Minister identified to us. So stakeholder engagement is really important. And internationally, if we look at any water quality campaign, about improvement, it's really important that all stakeholders are involved. Secondly is building awareness. The people that are farming or operating at the level of the water body, they need to know the water quality in their catchment area. So really important, the acquisition and the utilization of water quality data, and we're using the EPA data for this purpose. Next one is upskilling, and Cathal, you're very involved in the upskilling. Again, we need to upskill in the best technology available in terms of farmers, advisors, teachers, industry professionals and students. So we need to upskill where the technology is currently and how we can improve that technology at farming. The fourth one is knowledge transfer. It's really important that we have a strong impact knowledge transfer program, because farmers need support to implement these actions for change at farm level. So a really strong knowledge transfer program is a requirement. And in context with that, then we need a research program that supports the knowledge transfer program. Identify and develop new effective mitigation strategies will be very important as part of the delivery of the program. And finally, we need to be able to communication. Communication is really important. A strong communication plan with the target audience will be important. So the last slide then I have on this is collaboration. As the Minister said, this is a multi-actor approach. And a lot of industry would say, why do we need a Better Farm for Water campaign? And it's really, and as this slide demonstrates, it's the campaign that brings all our water quality programs together. We have a lot of strong initiatives in terms of improving water quality. Take the Farming for Water, the EIP, there's 60 million available. There will be supports there for farmers in terms of implementation, some of the changes we talked about. The ASA program originated back in 2018. It's a department-funded project, and it's an industry Teagasc initiative. And again, that's been in place. And that is a key initiative that will support the program. The ACP program, the Agriculture Catchment Program, is in existence since 2008. So again, that will be used in terms of identifying the actions and get them in place. The ACRES program, that's our sustainability, our new support for farmers. And again, there's initiatives as part of that will be important in improving water quality. The Water for Life, the Blue Dot, again, there are initiatives at particular water bodies that need to get at high status, and they will be important. And last, industry initiatives. And we saw just last week that Dairygold launched the Black Water campaign. And we saw before Christmas that Teagasc initiated the Slaney campaign. And industry initiatives are really going to be really important. But the other thing is, and it goes back to our collaboration, if you take it, Industry initiatives say the dairy gold suppliers, it's broader than that because it needs collaboration, like the Blackwater catchment. It's very important for Knockcock dairies. It's equally important for Tirlawn and equally and more, and of course, dominated from a dairy gold point of view. So collaboration is a key aspect of this. It is. See, a river catchment does not differentiate between industry, say, co-ops of that. So that's why we need really strong collaboration across industry to deliver this program. So just before I go on to my second section then, and Cathal referred to it, and it's the EPA report a couple of weeks ago, and it was early insight report on nitrogen concentration in 20 selected major rivers. And really the summary of that is saying is that and it was for 2024, it was nitrogen concentration, as I said, in 20 selected major rivers, and the results showed that they're the lowest since 2016, and a significant drop from 2023. All very positive, all very positive. But I'm just warning that this should be not used as a reason why we don't need the Better Farm for Water campaign. We have reduced, but we need to reduce it more. So it's great to start with, and that is the result of other initiatives previous years, but we need to bank on that and drive on in terms of improving it further. So the second part of my talk then is looking at the current status of these 8 river catchments prioritized for water improvement. And I've identified them there: the Bandon, the Lee, the Blackwater, the Shoe, the Nore, the Barrow, the Slaney, and the Boyne. And you could ask you, why did we identify those? And it was selected based on the EPA data, and these were catchments of concern for the EPA, and mainly due to high nitrate concentration. So there was a requirement to reduce the nitrate concentration in these. And you can see they're the southeast part of the country, basically. So that's why that's not to say that there'll be other water catchments identified at a later stage, but these are the priority ones that are going to have most impact. The program will be broader than these, but the focus to a large degree is about these 8 river catchments initially. So this is the EPA produced the ecological status of all river catchments in Ireland every 3 years. It's a 3-year cycle. The last publication was in 2021, and it covered the years 2016 to 2021. This year they'll be publishing the additional 3 years, 22, 23, and 24 in the report, and that will be published later in the year. And we'll be looking forward to how water quality has changed over a period. In this slide, it shows the proportion for each of those catchments, starting with the Bandon, the Barrow, the Blackwater, the Boyne, the Lee, the Nore, the Slaney, and the Shore, using the data from the 2016 to 2021 EPA report, and it shows the proportion of river bodies that are high, good, moderate, poor, or bad. And at the far right-hand side of the slide, I have the summary of the high and good, the proportion. So if you look at the Bandon, 67% of the water bodies on the Bandon are either high or good. And I go back again to the Water Framework Directive, is that all water bodies would be either high or good. And the average is 54. So you look at the Bandon, it's quite positive, it's 67%. So if you look at the other catchments that we've identified, the Barrow is 36%. So again, just to summarize, 4 of the water bodies, 4 of the catchments are greater than 60%. If we look at the Bandon, the Blackwater, the Lee, and the Slaney. And if you look at, there's 3 actually of those river catchments that are less than 40%. That's the Barrow, the Boyne, and the Shoe. So there is big variations between the river catchments. And that is why we look at it in catchment basis, because the pressures can be different, the circumstances can be different, the farming enterprise, the location, the soil type can be different. So that's why we have looked at it on a catchment basis. So you can see that some quite good, but a lot of work to be done to bring them all up to high or good status. The other thing is really important is to look at is the proportion that are moderate. If you have a large proportion that are moderate, it's easy enough to move those to good or high status. If you have a larger proportion that are poor or bad, and there's very few bad anyhow, that the requirement will be more challenging in terms of improvement. So with some of my colleagues in Teagasc, recently we've analysed those 8 river catchments, and we've looked at some aspects of the farming in each of those catchments. So the first thing we looked at the cultivated area, the proportion of those catchments that are cultivated. We looked at the average organic N loading on those catchments, and we looked at it in terms of greater than 170 kilos of organic N. And now this is the average for the catchment. If you're looking from an advisory program, you'll be probably looking at the sub-catchment level, and this data is available at the sub-catchment level as well. And that will be really important in terms of developing an advisory program. But these are at catchment level. So again, the banding again says number 1 is just 12.5% of the area is cultivated. So it's not a very cultivated tillage area. Average organic N is the highest of all the catchments of 126. And the proportion of the area that's greater than 170 kilos of organic N is roughly 27 or almost 28%. If we look at just the catchment below it, the Barrow, and the cultivated area, again, we know there's a lot more tillage in the Barrow, almost 32%. The organic N is lower because there's a higher proportion of tillage in there. And you look at the proportion of the area is greater than 170 is only 9.6%. And you can see for all the remaining catchments. And I know from an audience point of view, you'll be focusing in your own particular catchment. But I mean, the data is there now in terms of just the characteristics of the 8 river catchments are all done there. So if we look at the nutrient status then, and we talk about nitrogen and phosphorus levels on those catchments, and I'm using the 2024 data from the EPA. And these are the data that are used, the monitoring stations are normally the monitoring stations that are at the end of the catchment, just before the water flows from the fresh water into the estuary. So if we look at the banding, and again, just go back to EPA benchmarks. So from nitrogen point of view, they set a benchmark of 2.6 for the nitrate concentration of water going from the river into the catchment. You have another parameter set that is 1.8 milligrams of nitrate N, and I'm talking about nitrate N in all these discussions as for good water quality. So if we look at the banding, it's 2.36 last year. So it's less than the 2.6, which is a very good point of view. If you look at the Barrow, it's 4.15, well above the requirement for good water quality going into the estuary, and so on down now. The Lee, the best, 1.68. And if you look at the Suir, the very bottom is 2.34. So you have all the concentration. Again, large difference between the different river catchments, and all for different reasons. And you can see relate back to the previous slide. Look at the Barrow and the Slaney are particularly high. And they're related back to the soil type, but they're also related back to the farming, and there's a large proportion of tillage areas in those catchments. The other on the right hand side, I show you the phosphorus levels, and again, the requirement on phosphorus is to be less than 0.035 to be high quality water for good quality water, or 0.025 for high quality water. So if we look at it from a high water quality, they have to be less than 0.035. So you can see there's only one catchment actually greater than the 0.35, that's the Barrow, and the Boyne is exactly at 0.035. Again, just to emphasize that these are 2024 figures, and I'll show you the trends over the last 9 years for the individual catchments later on. But again, big variations and big challenges there in terms of getting those levels down. But again, I'll talk about the 8 actions for change and how we're going to achieve those reductions. So I have just eight slides now showing the trends from 2016 to 2024. And this relates back again to the EPA report at the very start. And I'm using the same monitoring station that the EPA used. And it shows the trends. And I have a dotted line showing the trend. So if the dotted line is going up, it means they're increasing. If the dotted line is going down, it means that on average, the trend is down. So if you look at just abandon, it shows that the trend has reduced over that period. and it was 3 milligrams of nitrogen at the very start, and it's somewhere less than that at this stage. The second line I have on it is the dotted yellow line, and that is the 2.6 that the EPA have said for water nitrate concentration for water moving from the river into the estuary. And the green dotted line at the bottom is the 1.8 for good water quality. So what can we say about the Bandon? Bandon, last year it was less than the 2.6, which is really good. If we look at it over the period, it has reduced, which is all a good story. Next one I show you is the Barrow, and again I showed you the average concentrations the previous time, and you can see that the average concentration has remained high over that period, significantly higher than what the estuary required. And if we look at it over the period, it has slightly increased, so it hasn't really changed. Although last year there was a slight reduction, but still far away from what we want to in terms. And again, much higher than what we want is the 1.8. Next one is the Blackwater. Blackwater last year was almost down to the 2.6, it was 2.7, just above what the estuary requires. And it has slightly, it hasn't reduced or increased over that 8 or 9 year period. Slight increase in concentration. You can see a large reduction last year in the concentrations. So if we were looking at the concentrations last year, they were well above what you require in terms of from the estuary point of view, almost at the estuary requirement last year. Look at the Boyne, we've seen a trend of increased nitrate concentration over the period. Even though last year the nitrate concentration was less than the 2.6 required for. The worrying thing from the UCF and Boyne is it has increased, but we've seen significant reductions last year in terms of the concentrations. If you look at the Lee, which is the lowest nitrate concentration of all the rivers, the catchments that we have included in the program, all years less than the 2.6, and last year even less than the 1.8. If we look at it over the period, it has reduced nitrate concentration, small, but it has been a steady trend of reductions in nitrate concentration over the 9 year period, 2016 to 2024. If you look at the northern, we've seen a slight increase in nitrate concentration if you look at the trend line, the current nitrate concentration is higher than what is required for the estuary. Although we've seen a significant reduction in nitrate concentration last year. So it has a way to go in terms of meeting the estuary requirement, but also, I mean, it's far away from what we talk about, what the EPA say is good water quality to 1.8 milligrams per litre. The Slaney is the one again that we showed that was high nitrate concentrations, and you can see over the period, nitrate concentrations have increased well above what the estuary requires. And the disappointing thing last year is that the level is higher. Is higher than what is required. Last year that the nitrate concentration increased, which was the only catchment or a river catchment that increased from 2023 to 2024. And the final one is the Suir, and you can see that on average nitrate concentrations have slightly increased over the 9 year period. Last year we saw a reduction, and the level last year was less than what is less than the 2.6 required by the EPA for water going from the river into the estuary, but higher than the 1.8 required. So that is a summary of the 8 river catchments that we have identified as part of the Better Farm for Water campaign. Now I want to go on to the third part of my talk, and I want to talk about the implementation of the 8 actions for change. And again, as I said, they're divided into 3 sections: nutrient management, farmyard management, and land management. The nutrient management is 3 actions. It's talking about reducing nitrogen or improving nitrogen balance. It talks about increased soil fertility. It's about talking the application of nutrients and using the 3 R's, the right time, the right rate, and the right place. Farmyard management is talking about slurry storage, reducing or increasing slurry storage, and soil water capacity, and it's also talking about reducing point source pollution. And the last one then is about land management, and we talk about fencing off water courses. We talk about the promotion of targeted measures like riparian margins, buffer strips, and sediment traps on farms. And the last one then is maintaining overwinter green covers on tillage land. So we just deal with the first action, is reducing purchased nitrogen, or we have redefined that now as reducing nitrogen balance. So what I've shown you here is the recent trends in fertilizer sales, and I'm comparing 2018 with last year, 2024. And if we look at it over that period, nitrogen use has chemical nitrogen sales, and this chemical nitrogen sales, sorry, I'm using, it has reduced by 24%. So on last year, we used somewhere over 310,000 tons of nitrogen, compared to back in 2018, it was over 400,000 tons. If we look at phosphorus, phosphorus is reduced from somewhere over 45,000 tons down to about 28,000 tons. And potash has reduced from about 120,000 tons down to about 95,000 tons. And lime, which is the one that I want to focus, has maintained somewhere around 1 million tons of lime. So a small reduction last year. So from a nutrient point of view, there's lots of positive things there in terms of the nitrogen, the phosphorus. Some people may be worried from a soil fertility point of view, but I'll talk about that later on. So this is an analysis that my colleague Ella carried out in Moore Park by Roel. And she shows that what she shows here is the nitrate leaching in kilos of nitrogen per hectare going from the period 2016 to 2023. And this is using National Farm Survey data. And it's used just for dairy farms. And you can see over the period from 2016, nitrate leaching on average from dairy farms increased from about 14, somewhere between 14 and 15 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare leached, up to over 15. And you can see it was high and slightly reduced over the remaining periods. And you see back in 2023, the nitrogen leached in terms of kilograms of nitrogen per hectare on the average on dairy farms was back to where it was in 2016. It's interesting when you compare this in terms of water quality changes. So, I mean, it's a really positive thing that on average, and this is a reflection really of nitrogen balance on these farms. So nitrogen balance improved on these farms with the result that nitrogen leaching reduced. So that is why it's really important. It's the first action in terms of the water quality campaign. This is another slide from our analysis, and she shows the changes in nitrogen balance for different organic end loadings on dairy farmers, again using the National Farm Survey data. And you can see that generally the nitrogen balance for all organic end stocking rates reduced over that period 2019 to 2023. But it's really interesting to see that at the high stocking rates, the high organic stocking rates, the reduction in nitrogen leaching was greatest. So that's a really positive story. So that is really what we want to do in terms of the first action. Second action then I want to just briefly talk about is ensure site fertility is optimal for lime, phosphorus, and potassium. What I'm showing here is the analysis that from Teagasc analysis on soil samples that were submitted for analysis in 2024. And if we're looking from a P point of view, generally a quarter of the samples, and this is for all farms, quarter of the samples are generally in soil index 1, 2, 3, and 4. If you look at it from a K point of view, less in soil index 1 and a greater proportion in 2, 3, and 4. As you know, our optimum is soil index 3. If we look at it from a soil pH point of view, that over 50% of our soil samples that were analysed last year were suboptimal in terms of soil pH. So, I mean, and really what I want to talk about is rather than focusing on P, and if you look at again the Teagasc report on P balances on farms across all, based on the National Farm Survey, somewhere around 4 kilos of P. So there is still surplus P in the system, but really about the P is targeting the P to the soils that are deficient. And that's what the story should be about there, and making best use of organic materials with a certain proportion of chemical P. If we look at it from a from a pH point of view, I mean, the work from Johnson Castle is really strong in this whole area. Is they're saying that increased soil pH to greater than 6.2 increases P availability, and it goes relates back to the P. Increasing the pH of the soil will increase the soil index of P, without ever increasing the soil application of P. And it will increase nitrogen use efficiency. They say that moving from a low pH to an optimum pH, that's worth around 75 kilos of chemical N per year. And again, pH is really important in terms of clover establishment. So if there was something we need to focus on as part of the program, I think the big one there is about soil pH. If we look at it in the MAC, we've set a target that we increase liming rate to 2.5 million tons by 2030, with just around 1 million tons. So it's a lot of work. It's a very cheap fertilizer. It can have significant impacts, and it's really important where we want to move in terms of water quality and in terms of climate change. The third one I want to talk about is nutrient management, and this is the 3 R's. And you talk about the right time, the right rate, and the right place. And that's really important. The right time is when you apply the thing, and it's within the growing season. The right rate, you don't apply nutrients at too high a level. And the right place is that it's the place that requires those nutrients. And critical for both chemical and organic manures, and I'm not dealing with it in the big, is pig and poultry manures, and that's really important. And spring application of moving more of our application of pig and poultry manure to spring application is really, because it's the right time then, and putting out the right rate then is also important, and the right place then is used. What I'm suggesting here is that Grass 10 newsletter is a weekly newsletter, and it's linked to a very good grass growth model that we have developed over a large number of years now, which has really been used by the industry now. And really what you're talking about here is precision nutrient management. And the newsletter that goes out every week can be really, and it is already doing this, but it can be even improved. And we go back to 2018 and all the things that were got wrong. And since then, we have learned a lot in terms of, and this can vary from location to location throughout the country and from soil type. So we can use this technology much better than what we've been using up to now, even though we have been using it very successfully up to now. So what are we saying then about nutrient management? What are the key actions we need? We need to use AgNav, and I've talked about AgNav up to now. That platform can be used to measure farm nitrogen balance. And it's been used in some of the industry. There you go, they're using it widespread at the moment. So we have a tool there that can give us nitrogen balance for all farms. We need to reduce our reliance on chemical N by greater use of organic manures. And I'll talk a bit more about that in further actions. Improve soil pH to increase nitrogen use efficiency and P availability, and the establishment of clover. And we can use pasture-based iron to increase nutrient efficiency much greater than what we've been using it up to now. So these are, I would say, the actions that we need around the first 3 actions as part of the 8 actions for change, and they all relate to nutrient management. Second area then I want to go on to is farm management, and we have 2 actions there: having sufficient slurry and soil water storage capacity. As we know, in the current regulations, it's 0.33 cubic meters of slurry per cow per week is the requirement. We have completed a survey for 1 year, and the analysis has been put together for this year. But preliminary findings say that from the survey is that the requirement currently is about 0.41 cubic meters per cow per year. That equates to about a 20% increase in slurry storage required. And this is particularly focused on dairy farms. So what are the advantages then of better slurry storage? It maximizes, the big advantage is it can maximize the fertilizer replacement value of N, P, and K. And this again goes back to the right time, the right place, or the right rate. it has the potential to reduce nutrient loss to water because it's replacing chemical or organic manures with chemical manures. And it can reduce nitrogen surplus on farm by replacing chemical nitrogen fertilizer. So increasing slurry storage really is important, especially from the dairy farmer's point of view, on improving nutrient efficiency and thereby improving water quality. The second area then under farm management is to manage and minimize nutrient losses from farmyards and roadways. Again, this goes back to the survey. Pine source pollution from farmyards and roadways can be a significant source of nutrient and sediment loss. There's no doubt about that. And again, if we go back to the preliminary findings from the Teagasc National Slurry Storage Monitoring Programme, it indicates that significant amount of water is into storage tanks, somewhere between 20 and 40 litres per cow per week. And that depends on very much on the weather conditions. So it's clear from us that we haven't optimum farm infrastructure in terms of minimizing pine source especially on dairy farms. So what do we need to do at farm level? We need to, in terms of management of clean water, we need better gutters and downpipes in good working order, and to pipe rainwater directly to soakways and not mixing with dirty water on the farm. We need to divert clean water away from yards and concrete areas. We need to restrict the farm traffic to certain parts of the farm, not big open yards, very difficult to manage, being soiled and contributing to dirty water. And we need to reduce the soiled yard area by regularly cleaning those dirty areas. So it's simple actions, and it's an initiative that can have significant benefits in terms of improving water quality. So that's action 5, and it's the 2 actions under farm management: slurry storage and pine source. So really in summary then on farm management, what are we saying? Based on current grant supports and deniment exemption for planning, livestock farmers should, I think, currently survey their farm in terms of current slurry storage capacity and pine source pollution. And where required, based on that survey, develop a plan to upgrade their infrastructure to reduce nutrient loss while also taking cognizance of labour efficiency from a labour efficiency point of view. So there's an action there in terms of farmyard management. There's 2 actions there. So the last section I want to go on to is talk about land management, and number 16 is to fence off the water courses to prevent bovine access. So many livestock farms are located on heavy soils and in areas where high water quality is a requirement. And I didn't talk about that much, but there is, good water quality is in certain pristine water bodies, there is a requirement for high water quality. There is a requirement to reduce nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment loss to water on these farms. So fencing off these waterways in association with riparian margins can protect diffused losses of nutrients and sediments. So it's a really important action, especially in heavy soils, and especially in areas where high water quality is a requirement. So that's action 6. Action 7 then is talk about land management, and is to promote targeted use of mitigating actions such as riparian margins, buffer strips, and sediment traps to mitigate nutrient sediments lost to water. So what can we do there? When applying chemical fertilizer, a 3-year buffer zone from surface water is required. Additionally, on tillage land, no cultivation is allowed in that area. Adopting riparian field margins and sediment traps for farm roadways can slow overground flow and disrupt pollution pathways, leading to significant nutrient loss and sediment runoff. So these initiatives, and we'll talk about them, a lot of these initiatives are already being funded either through the ECO scheme or through the EIP. So again, really important, and the same for action 6. So we come to the final action in land management, and that's to maintain overwinter green covers to reduce nutrient leaching from tillage sites. This is work that I got from that's carried out at Johnstown in the Castle Doctoral catchment, where they looked at they evaluated the use of cover crops to reduce nitrogen leaching. So what they were comparing in that scenario, they were comparing fallow or natural regeneration versus leafy turnips and forage maize. And you can see that the uptake of nitrogen with the forage maize was almost 30 kilos of nitrogen over the winter period, as compared to 5 kilos for the fallow and natural regeneration. If we look at it then from nitrogen leaching loss point of view, that over 30 kilos of nitrogen reduction in nitrogen leaching was achieved with the fallow and natural regeneration. Sorry, over 30 kilos of loss, whereas with the leafy turnip and forage maize, that was reduced to 10. So you had a reduction in nitrogen loss with that action alone of 20 kilos of nitrogen reduction in nitrogen leaching by implementing a green cover over the winter period. So the advantage of that is reduce nitrogen leaching, improve, and cover crops can improve soil structure from a tillage point of view, but sowing date and the choice of cover crops is really important. So what are the actions about land management? All livestock should be prevented from access to waterways, buffer zones, riparian margins, sediment traps should be incorporated to reduce overland flow and loss to waterways, and overwinter green covers are essential in reducing nitrogen leaching from tillage ground. So last section I just want to briefly go on is the management of the Better Farm Program, and that is continually evolving. So the initial part of that was to set up a water quality steering group that's chaired by Jim Bergen, former CEO of Teagasc, and there's 12 leading stakeholders involved in that. And that is really to monitor the program across all the 8 catchments, the river catchments. In the meantime, we have set up within Teagasc a separate water quality knowledge transfer department, and that's been headed up by Noel Meehan. He's been appointed there. So this department, knowledge transfer, can focus purely on improvement water quality. And in the last number of weeks, we have appointed now 6 catchment coordinators. We don't have a coordinator for each of the river catchments. We put the Bandon and the Lee together, and the Barrow and Nore as for one coordinator, and coordinator for the Bine, Shure, Slaney, and Blackwater. And Justin, Fiona is here on part of the seminar. She's the coordinator for the Bine. And then we would see within each of those catchments that there would be set up a steering group within an implementation group within those, and led by a catchment chairman. And our preference is that should be led by a farmer. The catchment coordinator will have a very important role in it. Dairy industry Ireland, meat industry, and tillage industry Ireland are going to be a very important part of that. Plus farmer representative, Teagasc, Department of Agriculture and Food, Law Pro, local authority, and community people involved. And I suppose the real action is going to happen at the farm level in terms of collaborating with the asset program that's already in existence, and that they're both Teagasc advisors and industry advisors. Law Pro are going to have an important role in terms of catchment support with catchment scientists. The agricultural catchment program is going to be very much involved in terms of the program that's currently in place. And 3 of those catchments are really central to this program, if you look at it from a geography point of view. The Teagasc wider advisory program is going to have a very important role. And the EIP Farming for Water campaign, for water initiative, is going to be really important in supporting the implementation of a lot of these initiatives at farm level. So in summary, Cathal, all I'd say is that water quality in Ireland is good, but there are significant opportunities for improvement. I would say that the adoption of the 8 actions for change will require changes of farm practice. And that's what we really have to work on. It's farm practice and being integrated into the current farm system that's been in place on those farms. A river catchment approach is preferable, and I think I made the case for that right through the talk. And as it will target specific mitigation, taking cognizance of the current ecological status in that catchment, the known pressures, and the farm management practices, because they vary from part of the country to part of the country. And I think a catchment kind of brings a team effort together and an ownership for the catchment. They're proud of their catchment, they're proud of that thing. It's really important. An intensive farm extension program will be required to assist farmers to change farming practice using the 8 actions for change. And the success of it will require strong collaboration with existing water programs, such as Teagasc, the Farming for Water EIP, as well as strong stakeholder engagements from farmers, dairy industry, Ireland, meat industry, tillage, LawPro, and the EPA. So I'll leave it at that, Chairman, and thank you very much for
That's great, Pat. Thanks a million. That's a really comprehensive presentation, and there's some exciting stuff coming down the line. A lot of work done already. I suppose, Pat, just to kick off, I read an article during the week or in last week, or I suppose the article in one of the papers was kind of suggesting that there's a lot of work going on in the water quality scene in different areas across the country, but there's no kind of one group pulling it together, and they're kind of calling for somebody to manage it. Is this trying to address that issue, the campaign?
Yeah, 100%, Cathal, you know, and we have initially discussed it with all these groupings, and I think there is an agreement on that. And I was at the launch of the Blackwater catchment last Friday or last Thursday, and the most interesting thing for me is that although it was being launched by Teagasc, you had the chairman of Teagasc and Tom Ryan from the leading the water quality campaign in the intro, as well as other representatives. So to seeing that like cooperation and ownership for it is really important. So I think it's happening, but it's different than other things that we have been initiated, Cathal, but I think it's happening now.
Yeah, I think you're right. And you mentioned yourself, it's all in together trying to work to achieve the one thing, but the localized approach is key, which you've suggested through your presentation. Fiona, I'll send a few questions over to you now, so I know there's plenty of them coming in.
There is, yeah. Pat, first question here for you is about we've all seen the impact of extreme weather events and how that potentially impacts on water quality. Is that class of data or information or research around that area, is that going to be part of this campaign, bringing that type of information closer to the farmer to allow for better decision making?
Yeah, Fiona, and I mean, there's lots of aspects to this work really, but we have, and working with the EPA have an amount of data come back a large number of years, and in fairness, they present the averages every year, but we need to analyze that data better, even looking historically, Fiona, and looking at those types of effects. Like what I showed you there was the average for any 1 year, but we didn't link it to soil type, we didn't link it to farm practice, we didn't link it to climate events and the climate at the time. So there is a work around that. And yeah, Fiona, I mean, we saw, I was listening to Eddie Burgess last year, talking about in one of the catchments where the level of P, the amount of P that was lost was in one flood, you know. So we have to be aware of these things. Yes, and I agree. So the way I would think about that, Fiona, is looking at the data we have, what can we learn from it, going forward, put mitigations. And there are mitigations probably that I haven't included there that will be important in terms of climate change. 100% agree with you.
Just a second quick question, Pat, there, following on from that, the comment was made that a lot of the information you put up there were on big areas, big catchment areas, but the assumption is that they can be looked at in a smaller chunks or units or smaller areas to make it more localized. Will that be part of this campaign, the availability of that information on a smaller subunit basis?
Yeah, and I agree totally. And I couldn't get into that detail for this seminar, you know, but I would see it working at the subcatchment level, you know, and subcatchments within the catchment, take the Blackwater, for example, there is so variation in farming systems and that within it, you know. So I would see working on the subcatchment. And we have all that data available on the subcatchment as well. So, and developing that type of information is going to be really important. And we're already in the progress of doing that. And we discussed that last week in a meeting, Fiona, that you were at. So yes, 100%. So yes, we have to target the measures to the sub, and it has to be the subcatchment level. Yes, 100%.
Pat, interestingly, there are quite a number of questions on the whole area of planning in farmyards around that slurry storage area, and the need for clarity for farmers in terms of planning going forward on production levels and storage requirements in order to allow them time to do that. The need for that information has been flagged here. I presume that'll be part of the campaign, or bringing that level of clarity to farmers to allow them make those decisions.
Yes, Fiona. I mean, increasing slurry storage is going to be one of the, and it's one of, I mean, all those 8 actions are a priority, you know what I mean? And they depend from farm system and area of the country. Slurry storage is, I mean, look at the survey saying that our requirement is 0.33, it should be 0.4, 20% increase. I think, yeah, we don't have the exemption from granting yet, but talk to the department, that's going to come later on in the year. But I don't think farmers should be waiting for that to come. I think they should be trying to think about it, their own farmyard and all. And I'd be honest, I think there's a lot we can do with farmyards and clean them up, especially dairy farmyards. They're too large, minimising the areas and minimising the dirty areas and that. And that's one area probably we haven't concentrated in recent years, but I think it's one of the areas. And farmyards looking well and all that, I think is really important. So point source is important. Slurry storage, they're two probably separate things, but they're equally important, I think.
And very quickly, because Cathal might want to come in here, but was quite an amount of interest about the tables you put up there on the different catchments, and that some of them with the highest stocking rates were not necessarily those with the lowest percentage of water bodies at high and good status. So kind of counterintuitive. So the question is about stocking rate isn't everything in these scenarios. It's quite an important factor, but there may be other things that play there too in those areas.
Yeah, Fiona, I mean, that's why we put it up, you know. I mean, to be fair, all those catchments are different in site type and location, and there's other factors there as well. But you're right on the principle that it's not all about organic inloading. It's farm system is going to be really important. And yeah, I agree. And that's why, again, that we approach it on a catchment level and a sub-catchment level. I agree. It's not everything, no.
There's a question around lime there as well, Pat, and I know you focus a bit on lime and saying that a lot of farmers, when we talk to them, would say we're hearing about lime for years and years. We're kind of nearly sick of hearing it, but there's still a job of work to be done. But somebody put a comment in there that just to remind people that some of that maybe the lime soil results might be in lake ground, low input grassland ground that doesn't require lime. So just to, I suppose, for biodiversity, so to be mindful of that.
Yeah, I accept it, Cathal, and we can go back on the soil samples, but a lot of those soil samples came in for productive grassland and are still suboptimal, and we know that. And I take your point totally. There are areas that the target increased lime won't be is not a priority, but I still think less than 50% of them are deficient in lime. And what we can get in lime, again, from a climate change and a water quality point of view, I think, Cathal, it's a no-brainer. I think it needs to be part of this initiative, you know. So I accept the point, Joe. I accept the point.
And potassium, I saw you have it down 27%. We're deficient in that as well. And I suppose, especially on those more productive farms, we're seeing that maybe silage ground and bale ground is deficient, and that's causing issues that are maybe our nitrogen use efficiency. Maybe.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And again, it's are we doing enough to target the slurry to where it's required? And this is about the correct place, you know, the 3 R's, you know, the correct time, the correct rate, and the correct place, you know. And if you look at it from a balance, overall national balance point of view, it's sufficient. It means that we shouldn't be putting out extra fertilizer to substitute for some bad management. That's all I'm saying, you know.
Pat, there's a very quick question here. Maybe it's not so quick, but you know, as you mentioned earlier, there are a lot of different initiatives already there. We have ASAP, we have ACP, you know, the Slaney project, as you mentioned, the Blackwater. How does this interact with those, or does it interact? Is it overarching? Where does it sit in terms of all the existing work that's there?
Yeah, I mean, we traveled to New Zealand there over 12 months ago, and the one thing I learned from New Zealand point of view, and it's probably water is slightly different. That's why it needs to be done at catchment level, because they need to take ownership for it at catchment level. It's different than lots of other technologies that would be the same for different parts of the country, you know. So taking ownership for it within the larger program, I think is really important. So getting everyone involved in the catchment and working together in the catchment. Like you take the ASSET program, it's a very important program. We need to get a lot of applications into EIP this year in terms of whether they're cover crops or buffer strips or whatever it is. So using that money and then getting the wider program out from a more extension point of view, all those are going to be really important, you know.
Yep. Cathal, back to you. Have you?
Yeah, there's a comment there, Pat, in some of the catchments, say, for example, Slaney, that, we have a good over 60% of good quality rivers in it. And I suppose just do we need to focus on what's affecting the ecological status? Because, we know on that side of the country, nitrogen in the estuary is a problem, but the rivers maybe might not suggest it in parts.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, phosphorus level in the Slaney is quite low. So that is saying that's mostly affect the river water quality. So the river water quality is quite good in terms of ecological status, over 60% of good water. If we look at it then from a nitrogen point of view, which nitrogen will have more impact at the estuary, and we know the estuary of the Wexford Harbour. So reducing nitrogen is going to be still really important in terms of from the Slaney point of view. But if we look at the data from the Castle Doctoral and that cover crops can reduce nitrogen loss by 20 kilos per hectare, 20 kilos per hectare. I mean, it's a no-brainer that we need widespread use of cover crops in the Slaney to reduce nitrogen losses. No doubt about it. And I think if we work on that, I think we can have significant reductions in nitrogen in emitting into the Wexford Harbour by implementing those initiatives. So again, it's a very different. I mean, that's why you want an action around a catchment, because what you prioritize in the Slaney could be very different to what you prioritize, say, in the Blackwater. So that's why, and again, it has to work back to sub-catchment level, as I said before.
And just there's a kind of comment in around urine patches, Pat, and I know you mentioned some of the work being done on maybe the plantain and that kind of stuff. Are we focusing a little bit on that nitrate loss in the urine patches?
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about urine patches are important in terms of nitrogen loss. So if we look at the literature, it's saying that this time of the year, urine patches have probably very little effect in terms of losses of urine nitrate to the groundwater. To talk from August onwards, it's a critical time. If you talk about how we can counteract that, I mean, the biggest thing is the crude protein concentrate of the herbage you're feeding. I mean, if you look at it from a nutrition point of view, you want to be somewhere around 18% crude protein. If your pasture is significantly higher than that, it means you are going to get much more losses through urine patches. So the urine patches is really a critical issue, as I would see it, is August, September, and October. How you feed your cow, how you manage your cows, and how you manage, and the type of supplement you feed, and the role of on-off grazing, and maybe in further on that the likes of other forages, and that has a role in terms of plantain, in terms of a role, but that's at research level. But there's lots we can do today in terms of reducing nitrogen loss from urine patches, especially in the autumn period, which is a critical time.
Unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. We're coming to the end of the webinar, but I'd just like to thank everybody for submitting questions. And Pat, thanks a million for an excellent presentation. It's really important to get an update on where we're at, and we might talk to you again in the future, but it's a very, very important topic. So thanks a million for presenting today. And Fiona, thanks a million again for questions, really, really helpful. And also to Yvonne Maher in the background, who's always looking after us and making sure that the webinar runs smoothly and manages everything in the background to make us look good up front. So thanks a million, Yvonne. And with, I suppose, just as regards next week is being Good Friday, so we're going to give you a week off next week, so we won't be here next Friday. We'll let you enjoy your Easter eggs for the weekend, but just we'll be taking a break, and we'll be back again on Friday, 25th of April, to discuss drainage status and management of peat grasslands with Teagasc researcher Dr. Pat Dillon. So that's not to be missed. It's going to be a really interesting topic. So do tune in again next Friday week at 9:30. Until then, I hope you have a great weekend and do enjoy the Easter break next week. And with that, slán go fóill.